welcome back to Tidbits from Rod. Today we're going to be working on my 1996 Corvette Collector's Edition. The purpose of this video is to show you how to remove the rear wheel bearings and replace them, and also to remove and replace the universal joints on the rear half shafts. The wheel bearings have a little bit of play in them, and you can only see that once the wheel's on. You take the wheel off, they seem fine. But anyway, I've got some vibration in the car and I'm going to be replacing these. Tuned. The idea of this video is to hopefully allow you to get some tidbits on how I remove them, and it may be different from how you remove them. But anyway, hopefully you get some benefit from this video and you might glean some useful bits of information, tidbits as I call them, to help you do the job on your own vehicles. So stay tuned, let's get into it. Okay, so this is the rear suspension unit set up on this 96 Corvette. And in full disclosure, what I'm doing here is going back to add a few more details to this video. And what you're actually seeing is a finished job. I wasn't happy with some of the editing in the video, so I wanted to put a bit more detail into it. We've got the brake caliper, which is going to have to come off. When you take the brake caliper off, you've got two bolts. There's one bolt here, and there's another bolt underneath here. Once this brake caliper comes off, make sure that you tie it back up here somewhere so it's not hanging on the rubber tube. Yep, my bad, I neglected to do that in the video, so don't hit me up on it. I normally do it, I just forgot. Once the brake caliper comes off, you'll be able to take the brake disc off. Again, in full disclosure, what you're seeing here is a new bearing in here, so there's no corrosion on this. But yours is likely to have a lot of corrosion in here where the water sits in, the wheel keeps the water in here and it corrodes. Your face is going to be corroded, and probably this disc is going to be corroded onto the wheel bearing carrier here. So you're going to use some WD-40 or some penetrant. You might even put some heat on here if it gets a bit tricky to take it off. You can hit these surfaces with a mallet, hide face mallet preferably, so you're not doing any damage and you don't hit the threads. If you're going to replace in the disc at the same time, then just knock it off, rotate it, knock it from the back. Once you've got that, I pulled the shock absorber off. There's two 1/2-inch bolts at the top, here and here, and there's one nut there that you pull off. The shock absorber will come off. Put some support under the spring because the spring will relieve and might drop down if you haven't got it supported when you pull that shock off. On the inside there's the carriers, which have got 4 5/16 bolts holding the inner universal joint to the carrier on the differential. They are corroded, so you're going to use a little bit of penetrant on those as well. Once you've got that off, to get the half shaft spline out of the wheel bearing, you're going to remove the split pin, the nut locking carrier, and the nut behind this. You take those out, and when you're ready, when you've got the inside 5/16 bolts undone, you can then gently, you're going to have to use a high face mallet or something, because again, you'll find the splines are corroded into the wheel bearing. So a little bit of penetrant inside here, and maybe using a high face mallet to start knocking this shaft through the wheel bearing. So anyway, stay tuned and we'll get into the rest of the video now, and I hope this helps. This is my C4 1996 Collector Edition Corvette. Got the LT1 engine in it, and already removed the wheel, but what we're going to be doing is we're going to change the wheel bearing. A little bit of play in these wheel bearings. We're going to be changing the drive shaft, the half shaft UJs. So stay tuned. What I found the easy way to take this apart, and hopefully you can glean something from it. So let's set this up. The caliper's already off. There's just two bolts holding the caliper on. So these two bolts bolt through the housing into the caliper, and obviously the rotor goes in the middle here, sits up on the brakes. Let's get started, and we're going to take that inner bearing out. 5/16 socket and a long extension. Rotate it round, put the other two at the top, long extension, 15/16. You don't need an impact wrench on these, but if you've got an impact wrench, it just makes it easier. You don't have a lot of arm movement here, you just buzz it off. But hey, the car's only got 47,000 miles on it, but it's 96, so what happens is these joints don't get a lot of utilisation. They corrode. As you can see here. Let's spin it back round and get that other. So to get this out, stub axle out of here, which is the U-jade onto that half shaft. I'm going to pull this off, drop that down. That allows me to tilt this out, and I can just drop the half shaft out. The UJ is actually corroded onto the housing. Just break it free a bit. Here she comes. There she is. They don't feel bad. This one's a little bit gritty. Grease is old in these. Feel okay. Just you can see where this had corroded into the seat and stuck in there. This one feels a bit gritty. This one's just corrosion. Doesn't feel bad. Anyway, the reason I took them out is to replace them. Okay, so here's the half shaft. I'm going to take we're taking the clips out. What I'm using here is a ball joint separator. In this case, it's a CV remover. Make life easier, an impact.
There's the CV out. Okay, we'll clean this up. I'm going to use some a file for a start, take off all the burrs around here if there's any. And then we're going to use aluminum brightener. This comes from Napa. It's in a white and blue bottle, and it will clean all this up very nicely. So here's the half shaft cleaned up. Cleans up pretty well. I have taken all the burrs off, cleaned them up, both ends. There's a part number of the half shaft if anybody interested. These are the Spicer original OEM parts, Dana Spicers. The part number of these are 5-1350X. So you get various flavors of these spicers, from budget to sports performance for racing. But say these are the ones when I done a cross match of the SPR 199. The original ones were SP R9AF were the originals. And when you go onto Dana Spicer's website, these are the new ones that are comparable with the old OEM ones. Yeah. So I'm going to use a bit of tape to tape the caps on to the ones like such, so it stops them falling off. And then we're going to press and now I'm not going to use the impact wrench, put these in. Far too easy. But anyway, it's in. You also get multiple new clips depending on what your application is. I find for this particular Corvette application, the grey ones. You'll find people get a big mallet and a socket, they bang these out. I'm not an advocate of that because this is a casting. You shouldn't be hammering on castings. You can deform them, you can crack them, you can put hairline fractures in them. That's better. That's gone all the way in now. You can hear them when they spring in. They clip and make a rather nice confirmation sound to show that they've gone in there. So there's one end in. Put the other end in. This is a view looking inside at the casting with the wheel bearing bolts on there. T55 drivers, TX55, and there's 3 of them. The spline goes through to the wheel bearing there. With the half shaft out, you got clear access into there.
Okay, so you take your T55 socket, driver, with an extension on to suit your taste, and just undo them. There's one of the bolts. And you'll find when you do that, the wheel bearing will come off.
So 3 torque bolts. There's the old wheel bearing assembly. You can find these at all different prices. You can get a set for about $70, I think, off of Amazon. You can go and get Moog parts, you can get Detroit axle parts. I would never go for the cheapest parts. Well, that depends on what you can do with your car. I've seen people selling these second-hand used on the internet. Now, to all intents and purposes, you cannot feel anything wrong with this particular bearing. It's only when you put the wheel back on, you've got a very slight bit of movement. I wouldn't even dream of putting these on the internet for sale or buying used ones. The amount of trouble you're going to get from buying used ones, even if they're originals, the trouble is they've done some mileage. And there's a potential that you don't know what you're buying, period. And if there's any play, well, why go through the aggravation? Anyway, I got a set from Detroit Axle. They seem pretty good at the moment, from what I can see. I'll let you know when I put them on and start driving. But anyway, there's the old one off. There's a spacer.
So the wheel bearing and the housing separate, and when you want to put the new one on, you take your new wheel bearing, line out with the holes. Don't forget the bracket goes forward for the caliper. You take one of your bolts, get the bolt started, and you go underneath and tighten these up to 66 foot-pounds. Okay, take the torque wrench and you tighten these up to 66 foot-pounds. Okay, once you've torqued up the Torx head bolts for the new wheel bearing, you're going to take your new drive shaft, overhaul drive shaft, grease the splines. Don't forget the washer, thrust washer that goes in there. Grease the splines, slide it in like such. Align the UJs with the other end. Just put the clamps back on the inner universal joint, constant velocity joint on the diff. So I'm putting a bit of blue Loctite around the bolts. Okay, spin the axle. You're ready for the other one now. Bit of blue Loctite around the bolts again.
When you're doing this, make sure those caps are actually seated in the housing, the diff part of the connector. They come right up. So just check that they're fully seated before you start bolting this up and clamping it up. I'd already done that before I set this camera up. Okay, 22 foot-pounds torque on those bolts. Spin the axle around. There's the half shaft in. New constant velocity joints, UJs. Clean up. New wire bearing. Could have put the retaining bolt on here and torqued that up. Put a split pin in here. So there's your washer that goes on. There's your nut that goes on. Put your split pin in. Trim the ends back. So, new wheel bearing, clamped up, cleaned up, new drive shaft. Now I'm going to put the control arm on. I've replaced the bushings in these, and I'm now also going to replace the control arm bushings here. These two control arms, upper and lower control arms, the bushings are shot. So stay tuned for that one.